Czech warning. Ukraine won't face a 1938-style betrayal. It is Saturday, January 24, 2026, and the gloves are finally coming off in Central Europe.
We're watching a continent on the absolute edge.
Exactly. We're seeing ghosts of the past resurface and witnessing this desperate scramble to prevent history from repeating itself, or at least from rhyming.
And it comes just days after a secret summit in Paris. A new coalition of the willing is emerging that might just change the entire trajectory of the war.
It feels like a moment of truth for the entire alliance.
It really does. And look, before we get into the details of this new coalition and what it all means, if you're following this conflict and you want to stay ahead of the curve, you really need to subscribe to Defense Reports.
Absolutely. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. Seriously, don't miss out.
Because today, we're unpacking something that isn't just news. I mean, this is history happening in real time.
I'm Alex. Join me with Arya in the latest podcast by Defense Report for sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going deep on that coalition of the willing.
We're looking at a major clash. A new populist government in Prague versus a Senate that is absolutely determined to stop a catastrophe.
And we're talking about a multinational force with a plan to turn the Ukrainian army into Europe's, and I'm quoting here, first line of defense.
We're also going to break down something called the Munich syndrome. You'll hear why Czech leaders are convinced a secret deal is being cooked up to carve up Ukraine, just like Czechoslovakia was in 1938.
And we've got the numbers on the staggering success of the ammunition initiative. We're talking 1.8 million shells delivered, but also the political thriller behind why the new Czech prime minister threatened to scrap the whole thing.
Plus, a major showdown in the Czech parliament. It got so bad, the Senate had to officially apologize for the hate-filled rant of a high-ranking official.
So the mission for this deep dive is clear. We need to understand if Europe can finally stand on its own 2 feet to save Ukraine, or if that specter of appeasement is about to win again.
It's a huge question.
Okay, let's start there. We keep hearing this term floating around, the Munich syndrome. To most people, it just sounds like some abstract political theory. But looking at the reports out of Prague this week, this isn't a metaphor for them, is it?
No, not at all. It's deeply, painfully personal. To understand the sheer panic in Prague right now, you have to go back to September 30th, 1938, the Munich Agreement.
Right. In our history books, we call it appeasement, a failed policy.
But for the Czechs, it's the Munich Betrayal. It defines their entire modern identity. This was when Britain and France, the big powers of the day, sat down with Hitler and Mussolini.
And just agreed to let Germany annex the Sudetenland. The idea was land for peace. You give the dictator a piece of what he wants and he'll stop.
Peace for our time, as Neville Chamberlain famously said. But the detail that drives current Czech policy, the thing that keeps them up at night, is who wasn't in the room.
The Czechoslovaks?
They were literally waiting in the hallway of the hotel while their own allies carved up their country. There's a Czech phrase for this you're seeing everywhere now. O nás bez nás.
About us, without us. That loss of agency, that's the real trauma.
That's it. And that is the exact lens through which the Czech Senate is viewing 2026. They look at the rumors of a potential deal between a returning Trump administration and Russia, and they are terrified.
Terrified that Ukraine is about to become the new Czechoslovakia.
The fear is that the big powers will sign a deal over Kyiv's head, forcing them to give up territory for a peace that won't even last 6 months.
It's interesting you mentioned the Senate specifically. We saw documents from late 2024 where the Czech Foreign Ministry actually opened their archives from that week in 1938.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a sudden decision. The archives showed this day-by-day collapse. The telegrams, the desperate calls for help that were just ignored by London and Paris. It reinforced this view that appeasement failed because Hitler was, unappeasable.
And the Speaker of the Czech Senate, Milo Vystrčil, he draws a straight line from Hitler to Putin.
A very direct line. I was reading the transcript of his speech in Kyiv. He explicitly linked the occupation of Donbass and Crimea to the annexation of the Sudetenland. His argument is simple. Concessions to dictators never bring stability. They just feed the beast.
And he frames it as more than just politics.
He frames it as a moral duty. This is where it gets really interesting. He compares supporting Ukraine to the righteous among the nations, the people who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. He says we need that same daily courage now.
So for the Senate, this is about redeeming their own history. They're trying to be for Ukraine what no one was for Czechoslovakia.
They see themselves as the canary in the coal mine. They know if you sacrifice a smaller democracy for a false peace, you don't get peace. You get total war.
And they aren't just giving speeches about it, they're making moves. Let's pivot to that big news from earlier this month, the Paris summit on January 6th.
This was the moment, the birth of this coalition of the willing.
I like that name. It implies they're breaking away from the consensus paralysis you sometimes see in NATO.
That's exactly the point. This isn't the EU getting bogged down in bureaucracy. This is a core group led by the UK and France, with strong backing from countries like Czechia deciding to act now.
And the headline from Paris was, the declaration of intent on deployment of multinational forces. Deployment is a heavy word. What does that actually mean?
It's a huge shift in thinking. For a long time, the West treated the armed forces of Ukraine, the AFU, as sort of a proxy force we were helping. This declaration formally recognizes the AFU as Europe's first line of defense.
Which means it's a two-way street. If they're the front line protecting the continent,
then Western nations are the strategic hinterland.
The arsenal, the logistics base.
Exactly. But the biggest development, the thing that has the Kremlin really worried, is the plan for a reassurance force, or the MNFU, Multinational Force Ukraine.
Okay, we need to be very precise here. This isn't just about sending more helmets or training soldiers in Poland. The MNFU sounds like it could involve boots on the ground in Ukraine.
Potentially, yes. But the timing is absolutely critical. The plan they're building a headquarters for in Paris right now is to deploy this force after a ceasefire.
After. So the goal isn't to join the trench fighting tomorrow.
No, it's to guarantee the peace the day after the shooting stops. Think back to 1938. Once the agreement was signed, Hitler just waited a few months and took the rest of the country. There was no one there to stop him.
So the MNFU is designed to be that stopgap, a force of, 34 countries?
Roughly, yeah. They're looking at peacekeeping, naval mine clearing, air policing, logistics, a whole suite of capabilities to make sure a ceasefire actually holds.
It's a massive tripwire. Russia would know that if they break the peace, they aren't just rolling back into Ukrainian territory, they're rolling into British, French, and Polish troops.
It's Europe's insurance policy, and frankly, it's also a plan B for American unpredictability. The situation in Washington has really lit a fire under this coalition.
They realize they can't just rely on the U.S. security umbrella anymore.
Right. They need their own tangible action plans. Because diplomatic gestures mean nothing to a revisionist power like Russia.
It's a huge step. But plans are one thing, and the reality of war is another. You need bullets. And this is where the Czechs have punched way above their weight with this ammunition initiative.
It is, without a doubt, the biggest logistical success story of the last year. A complete lifeline for Kyiv.
The numbers are just mind-boggling. In 2025 alone, this one initiative delivered 1.8 million rounds of large-caliber ammunition to Ukraine.
Let me put that in perspective for you. That accounted for 43% of the total ammunition supplied to Kyiv that year. 43%.
So nearly half of the shells Ukrainian artillery fired to hold back the Russians came through this one Czech channel.
And what's so clever is that Czechia didn't make these shells. They aren't a manufacturing giant on that scale. They went out and found them.
A masterclass in gray market logistics.
That's a great way to put it. They used their old Cold War era connections to find shells in non-EU, non-NATO markets, countries that maybe don't want to be seen publicly helping Ukraine but are very happy to sell.
So Prague acts as the quiet middleman. They find the shells, scrub the origin, and then the donors pay for them.
Germany, the Netherlands, Canada, about 15 countries in total pooled around $4.5 billion. The Czechs source the ammo, the Allies write the check, and the shells get to the front.
It's brilliant, but there's always a but. The new Czech Prime Minister, Andrej Babiša, he wasn't exactly a fan.
No, he was not. He and his ANO party won the elections in October 2025 on a very populist Czechia First platform. He spent the campaign calling the initiative overpriced and non-transparent.
The standard playbook, right? Why are we spending billions abroad when we have problems at home?
Exactly. And some of his coalition partners are openly pro-Russian. So in early January, there was this huge review by the Czech Security Council. There was a real fear in Brussels and Kyiv that Babiša might scrap the whole thing to please his base.
But he didn't. The shells are still flowing, so what happened?
Well, he may not have changed his mind, but he definitely looked at the balance sheet. The reason the initiative survived is pretty simple and cynical.
It makes money.
It makes a lot of money. Despite the rhetoric, the initiative was hugely profitable for the Czech defense industry. They only contributed about 1.7 billion Czech crowns themselves, but the influx of donor cash and technology transfers meant they recovered far more than they ever spent.
So Bobby is a populist, but he's a businessman first. He couldn't kill the golden goose.
He's walking a very fine line. He talks tough to his base about audits and prioritizing checks, but he knows the program is too big to fail. It's become a pillar of their security and their standing in NATO. Killing it would be political suicide on the international stage.
It's a fascinating dynamic. This pragmatic, almost profit-driven populism in the government clashing with the moral crusade we see in the Senate.
And that clash just exploded with the scandal involving the other speaker, Tomio Okamura.
Oh, this was a mess. Okamura is the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house, a far-right figure.
Right. And in his New Year's speech, he just went full Russian propaganda. We're not talking about simple skepticism here. He was repeating Kremlin talking points verbatim about the Ukrainian leadership.
It was so bad the Ukrainian ambassador, Vesel Zverich, publicly called the remarks hate-filled. It was a major diplomatic incident.
And this is where the Senate, the good cop in this scenario, had to step in and do damage control. On January 21st, just a few days ago, they passed a formal resolution.
A resolution officially distancing themselves from Okamura's statements. I mean, that's incredible. One House of Parliament formally apologizing for the Speaker of the other House.
It's a national apology, effectively. They wanted to send a crystal clear signal to Kyiv, Paris, and London that Okamura does not speak for the Czech Republic. They affirmed total support for Ukraine, the Shell Initiative, and the coalition. It just shows you this internal battle for the soul of Czech foreign policy.
It really does feel like a government fighting with itself.
It's a divided government, but so far the institutions are holding. The Senate is a check on the populism of the lower house. But there's another piece of legislation that shows how tricky this all gets: the Lex Ukrajina amendments.
I was reading about this. On the surface, it seems like a tough, smart security measure. It requires Russian applicants for Czech citizenship to first renounce their Russian citizenship.
It sounds totally reasonable, right? You want clarity of allegiance, no dual loyalties to a hostile state.
But there's a catch.
There's a huge catch. In practice, Russia just blocks its citizens from renouncing their citizenship. They refuse to process the paperwork. So critics argue this law creates a false illusion of security.
Because if the Kremlin controls who can renounce their citizenship, they effectively get a veto over who can become a Czech citizen.
Exactly. It hands a lever of power over Czech immigration policy directly to Putin. If he wants to stop a dissident from integrating into Czech society, he just says no. And under this law, their hands are tied. It's a subtle point, but it shows how complex this de-Russification process really is.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together for everyone listening. We have the historical trauma of 1938 driving the Senate. We have this new coalition of the willing building a security backstop in Paris. We have the ammunition flowing, despite all the political drama. What's the big takeaway here?
The big takeaway is that the Munich syndrome has changed. It used to be this passive trauma, something that happened to them. Now it's an active policy engine. The Czechs and this whole coalition have decided the lesson of 1938 isn't just that diplomacy failed.
It's that peace without guarantees is suicide.
That's the core of it. And that is the strategic shift we're seeing. Europe is moving toward autonomous defense. This coalition is proof that key European powers are preparing to secure Ukraine, even if the US pulls back.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. A false peace, another Munich.
Would just be buying a little time before a much wider war. It would embolden Russia, just like the original emboldened Hitler. The alternative is what they're planning in Paris. Real security guarantees, real military force, making the cost of aggression so high that Russia has to stop.
It truly feels like we are living through history. The dates, the secret summits, it has the feel of 1938, but this time, the so-called small nations are refusing to wait in the hallway.
That's the hope, isn't it? That this time, they're kicking down the door.
But I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about this reassurance force deploying after a ceasefire. But here's the chilling question. If the Munich betrayal led to total occupation within 6 months, what happens if this coalition of the willing fails to turn its paper agreements into boots on the ground before a forced ceasefire is signed? If the ink dries and the troops aren't there, does history just repeat itself anyway? That is the race against time.
A race we cannot afford to lose.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Stay informed.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.